just being in the right headspace is super important for the productivity of because it shapes the temperature of the team around you and the temperature of the entire business. My name is Ken Njoroge, father of 5, 3 of my own, 2 adopted, husband to 1 wife. I've been an entrepreneur for 22 years, and for the last 17 years I co-founded and ran Cellulant. Cellulant is a payments company operating in Africa. We're based out of Nairobi. And so we built a payment platform across 35 countries. So we have offices in 18 countries that are serving customers in 35 countries. And so what we do is we operate a platform that provides a single point of connection for merchants who want to make and collect payments from 35 countries in Africa, and supporting about 240 payment types from credit cards, mobile money, bank transfers, and these kinds of payment instruments that are quite varied in Africa. Founder Wellbeing is probably one of the most important parts of a founder that you've got to manage, right? Because the business, the board, the customers, and they expect you to be a high performance machine, and a good part of that performance is essentially where your headspace is at, right? I co-founded and ran Cellulant for about 17 years, and I left as a CEO seat wasn't exactly voluntary. And one of the things that happened towards my final months was my wife just looked at me and said, "Listen, dude, I've been the co-wife for 17 years. Actually, she said I've been second wife for 17 years. And I and the kids want to be number one again. And this is not gonna work." And what had happened actually is that I had, I think about 4 or 5 years of sort of sustained crisis in the business. So from, I think, the first year of crisis, our main banker collapsed. So we're a payments business with settlement facilities and all of that stuff. So that took the business into crisis. We had to make layoffs. We had to take salary breaks for months on end. Then, after sort of stabilized from that crisis, I had to go fundraising, 2017, 2018. Normally, in our ecosystem, it would take about 6 to 9 months. This took about 18 months. So we had sort of 2 years of sustained pressure. And for me as a founder, was out on the road at a very difficult time in the market. And then talked to about, I think I had a short list of about 60 investors, had about sort of 400 plus presentations, conversations in that journey. Only got 1 term sheet, right? So you can imagine you hear a lot of no's in a very long time. And of course, just being on the road, being on flights and so on is also very taxing. And then 2020, we had a corona. So I think what my wife was basically sort of calling out is just saying, look, for 5 years, you've generally sort of been in a very different headspace, and I was sort of bordering on burnout. Of course, during the same period, you had become a terrible boss, right? So under all of this pressure, and I just didn't realize it. So I think just being in the right headspace is super important for the productivity of because it shapes the temperature of the team around you and the temperature of the entire business. If you don't have these very close people, trusted people that would sort of call you out on these things, you'll probably burn out, and that's super catastrophic, right? It's catastrophic for your family, catastrophic for the business, and during that period you break things that you can't actually fix. And so when I coach founders, one of the first things that I always say is that, okay, so can I look at your calendar, right? And without a doubt, you always find most calendars sort of back-to-back meetings for 12 hours, 14 hours on end, right? And I think that's probably one of the first enemies to fight, right? I think one of the things that I found super helpful was to have a lot of white space in the calendar. And I've got a rule of thumb for it, which is maybe a day and a half a week, right, in 2-hour blocks, half-day blocks, and so on and so forth. That allows you to do sort of some mental clearing, right? Because what happens is that you've got all these sustained things that are sort of firing at you And all of them seem to carry the same critical nature. And then if you're running from one meeting to another, essentially you've got all these things that are brewing that are super critical, that have all this sort of pressure, and you're largely not processing them, right? Like you're not figuring out, okay, this one looks serious, but maybe it's not that serious. This one looks urgent, but actually can wait. Like you need these white spaces to be able to clear all of those things, so that to be able to just live a balanced life. I think that's probably the first takeout. The second takeout in terms of wellness, therapy is super important. I think when I was transitioning out, one of the best decisions I did was actually just talk to a therapist. And there's always a taboo around this. But actually therapists, they give you a framework within which to understand some of the stuff that you're going through. I think it's super important that the business succeeds, but also important that the founder and their families also succeed. Knowing what I know today, how would I sort of walk through this sustained crisis much better? I think number one, I would put a lot more white space in my calendar, right? So if you need to go on leave and switch off. In your daily calendar, put a lot of white space where you have thinking time, no meetings, nothing. And take 1 or 2 days of your weekend away. There's a reason why that works, and you just got to do it. And I need to do it in a more disciplined fashion. I would have done that. Second thing, I would have been much more intentional in making time for friends that were outside sort of my work zone. Then that allows you to sort of go into different headspaces and different things and so on and so forth. And if you don't do the first one, you will do the second one, right? Because you always sort of run under no time. You don't have time to do things. And the third one, put a therapist on retainer. When I look at high performance athletes, and I look at the team around a high performance athlete, our entrepreneur is essentially a high performance sport. So, what the hell makes us think that you sort of will run a high performance sport solo? And that high performance is in the mind, rightly, of solving problems, thinking through stuff and so on. So the equivalent of the physio and, sort of sitting in ice baths and all of that stuff is actually a therapist. You sit across and say, this is what I'm feeling, what does it mean, and so on and so forth. Like, as a regular part of the thing, not as a response to a crisis. That's what I'll do different.